So to tell you a little bit more about me, I'm actually an MD-PhD student.
This is some quality content. Hello, welcome back. So I really wanted to make this video today because as an undergrad, I actually did not know any MD-PhDs. If only there was some YouTuber out there who talked about the MD-PhD program, maybe things would have turned out a little bit different. And I know there's a lot of information out there online about information on the MD-PhD program, but it can take a lot of time to find information gathered from all these separate, disparate resources and then collate it into one area. So I hope this video will combine that information in one place and sort of serve as a starter pack for those of you who may be interested in an MD-PhD program or have no idea what this crazy program is all about. And I know from personal experience that it's hard to see yourself in a certain program if you don't know anyone who's currently in it. I think knowing someone who is going through the process or has gone through it really helps humanize this whole process or program. And with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome today's guest, an aspiring neurosurgeon scientist, chef / expert vegetable cutter, junior Olympic water polo player. What the? I can't even swim. The only thing he needs left is YouTube star. Oh wait, he does that too.
Yeah, you make me sound like the biggest gunner on planet Earth. I always thought like, that's where all the nerds go. There's no way I'm ever gonna make it. Med school curriculum, I think, across the nation is trash. My UCLA professors, I'm so sorry if you ever watch this. I am currently a third-year bioengineering student at Caltech, so I'm working on developing cell-based therapeutic and diagnostic agents for cancer. But in the future, I do want to do neurosurgery, and I would love to be a neurosurgeon scientist. But in the meantime, I have all these hobbies and interests I've developed: cooking, gardening. I really enjoy surfing. It kind of that's one of the main reasons I came back to LA for school. So
the only thing you have left is YouTube star, huh? But I guess
no, we're
yeah, I guess you got that covered.
we're stuck at 100 subscribers for now.
Are you kidding me? 100 is so much. Like, it took me a long time to get to 100, I think. I'm not sure. Can you just briefly go over the structure? So how long is an MD-PhD program in years? And then how many years is it split into MD and then PhD?
MD-PhDs generally go 8 or 9 years in length. And it's because you're doing 4 years for an MD and then 4 or 5, potentially longer for a PhD. And the way that most programs will split it is it's 2 years of medical school first, so you get all of your preclinical book knowledge out of the way, and then you leave for your PhD, finish defending your thesis, and then you go back to the clinical years of medical school where you do your rotations and you actually get to see patients. I think in terms of just general length, there are some people that do it faster, and I think programs are starting to shorten their training because it's just so long. So they're actually shortening the preclinical years and they're condensing it to 1.5 years. So you have more time to actually do research, and I think it's getting a lot more accessible to people who may not want to dedicate their entire 20s to being in school.
So with the program being so long, right, there must be some sort of advantage to getting an MD-PhD?
Yeah.
What would you say are the advantages of getting an MD-PhD versus an MD only or a PhD only?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right off the bat, I think the best thing is that most MD-PhD programs are fully funded, which means they're sponsored by the NIH and medical school is completely paid for. So you don't have any debt coming out of an MD-PhD program. And in addition, they'll pay you a 35K stipend every year. So in medical school, I was getting 35K. As a grad student, I get 35K. It's not a tremendous amount of money. Like if you were in another competitive field, you would be making double, triple that. But the fact that we get to pursue what we love and work on becoming future physician scientists and not have to worry about money is it's an incredible blessing. And in terms of the benefits in the long term, I would say there's no other training that offers such crazy career flexibility. So even in our program at UCLA, there are people who go into finance, there are people who do consulting, there are people who do biotech, some stay in academia, they just do medicine, some do straight science. And if you have any interest in any of those fields, the training where you have to solve an incredibly difficult research problem suits itself well to whatever you want to do in the future.
Beautiful. So just in case someone watching doesn't know this, the MD PhD is an entirely separate program from MD and PhD. So when I was an undergrad, I had no idea. I thought that it was just you get MD and then you get PhD after. I didn't know that it was its entirely separate program itself. And so there's the MSTP, so Medical Scientist Training Program, and then there's the MD PhD. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, so the MSTPs, they're the ones that are officially funded by the NIH, and you're guaranteed funding if you're in an MSTP. And I think the vast majority of MD PhD programs in the US are NIH funded, so they're designated MSTPs. And if you are a program that isn't an MSTP, you're still probably going to be funded. And if you're going to a program that doesn't have funding, I would very seriously consider choosing a different program, because it just doesn't seem worth it to put that financial burden on yourself if it's not necessary.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the non-funded ones, you would be in school for 8-9 years, and then you would also have to pay for your tuition. Oh, hell no! So PhDs, they obviously don't have clinical training, so they can't treat patients. MDs, they have the clinical training, but they don't have the research training. But MDs are technically still allowed to perform research.
Exactly.
So would you say to someone who wanted to do research and medicine, but didn't want to do the 8-9 years of MD PhD training, to pursue an MD only and then do research, or go all out and do the 8-9 years of MD PhD training?
That's a fantastic question, and I think there are pros and cons to both. The big caveat that I'll tell you straight off the bat is there are incredible scientists that I've met who are only MDs. So they got their medical degree in 4 years and then just went on to do science. And at every institution I've trained at, there have been phenomenal scientists who are doctors and physicians by training, and then they do fantastic science. The biggest drawback is, though, if you just have an MD, it's a lot harder to get research funding. And I found that if you want to get your foot in the door of an NIH funding or any sort of private funding grant, the PhD actually really helps. It gives you a little bit of cachet. And a lot of people who go through PhD training, they'll actually have the opportunity to apply for fellowships. So if you win a fellowship at your PhD stage, it's a lot easier to be a young professional and say, hey, look, I know what I'm doing. I can continue down this path. The con for just doing an MD, though, is you don't have that protected research time where you can learn and grow as a scientist, and then also kind of learn the game of applying for funding and using the funding wisely on impactful research projects.
Ah, beautiful. Well, I didn't get that answer when I Googled it online, so that was good. So also a super simple question, but something that I see come up in Reddit, every forum out there, is what type of research is possible to pursue during the PhD? I think people think that MD PhD, they think that, oh, it has to be clinical research.
And that's also a great question. I guess the world is your oyster if you're an MD PhD, and I think depending on what you're interested in, we need to learn a lot about a lot of different fields. So I wouldn't pigeon yourself if you want to be a physician to say, I have to do translational work or I have to do medically relevant work, because even amongst like the, 100 of us at UCLA, Caltech, we span the gambit of what people are working on. Like I do hardcore cell engineering, and hopefully it does impact patients in the future. I know people who are doing hardcore basic science work, right? Some people work with aerospace engineers at Caltech, and I know MD PhDs who get like electrical engineering training. And if you think about where the future is, we can't just all be biologists. We need electrical engineers who understand brain-machine interfaces. We need to figure out how to get better medical devices. you have a skill set, and I think if you want to apply it, you can pick any research within reason. I think there are a few programs nationally that support anthropology and humanity type PhDs. These PhDs are also very useful if you want to make an impact and you want to innovate for the future. I would really recommend trying or thinking about MD-PhD.
Sounds like with MD-PhD you could literally do anything you want.
Within reason, but yeah.
So post-graduation, I've heard of this sort of 80-20 split where it's 80% research and then 20% medicine. So a lot of the people in their career paths, they dedicate a majority of their time towards research rather than seeing patients.
I think 80-20 has been traditionally touted by just about every MD-PhD program director for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's how it works currently. And the reason for that is because if we think about how much it takes to become a great physician and how much it takes to become a great scientist, it's almost cheapening the profession by saying I can spend 20% of my time being a scientist or a physician and be good at it. So I would say a lot more people are specializing nowadays than ever before. So there are people who are pure clinicians and they actually collaborate with scientists, but the PhD is useful because they understand how science works and they're more high-level thinking, right? Like, what's the overall research direction that we should go, as opposed to let me figure out how to apply for funding and manage the day-to-day of running a lab. And then there are people who are the other side of the spectrum where they're hardcore scientists and their medical education helps guide their scientific journey, right? They want to do medically relevant research, but they don't do any clinic, and they're very, very productive scientists. The whole point is you're getting 8 years of training, you're doing really intense work, and the goal is you have this great skill set that can be applied to a bunch of different problems.
So that brings me to, what are the career paths of MD PhDs and what are you currently pursuing?
Once again, as flexible as you want them to be. Really depends on how you strategically work during your MD PhD. So if you have this more industry bend, you would do research that's more industry focused, and you would also, you know, hopefully get internships in SF or somewhere where there's biotech happening, like Boston. Otherwise, I think the vast majority of people do end up going to the traditional residency route, and you can hit any specialty that you want. I know some people who forego residency, even though that is the most common path, and they just do science. For me personally, I do want to do neurosurgery, which I think is kind of an uncommon thing for MD PhDs to want, because it's another 8 years of training post MD PhD. So I'll be 38 when I am a full-fledged attending.
Yeah, you'll be 38, but you'll be a god at 38.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really excites me about, I guess, committing to such a long training is the fact that the brain is really a black box to me. Like, I have no idea where we're going to be in neuroscience research, and I think there are so many problems to solve in the brain. And it would be a disservice to what I want to accomplish if I didn't understand how to problem solve. So I don't think we want neurosurgeons to be stagnant. I don't think we want the field to stagnate. So, you know, if it takes a PhD to understand how to tackle these kind of really important problems like cancer and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, like, so be it. You know, if that's what it takes to make an impact in the field, totally worth it.
So just out of curiosity, how will that look like for your training? How much time would you dedicate towards your residency, and then how much time would you dedicate towards your research?
Most neurosurgery programs have it where you have, of the 7-year residency, 5 years where you're in the clinic focusing on becoming a good surgeon. And then 2 of the 7 years are more protected for research, right? Because they want problem solvers for the future, they allot 2 years of time for their residents to learn basic science research and learn how to problem solve.
Well, I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for all those vlogs that are gonna be coming out, I assume. How are you gonna manage YouTube in that also? Cutting people's brains open during the day, and then research at night, and filming and editing YouTube on the weekends. I think you'll be the first physician neurosurgeon YouTuber out there. I don't think there's any other. Okay, so let's talk about your road to MD PhD. How did you decide to apply to MD PhD, which is obviously a huge commitment? Like, just applying is a commitment. And what experiences led you to come to this decision?
I knew I wanted to be a doctor my first year of undergrad. So on that journey, I kind of decided I might as well get involved with research because it seemed like it seemed important to do at the time. I didn't realize how much I would love doing research though. I started working on tissue engineering and it was fascinating, and the research bug bit really hard. And then my junior year of undergrad, I met an MD PhD at Hopkins, kind of just happenstance. I don't even know how this happened, but we kind of ran into each other on campus. And he was like, oh, my name is Josh, I'm an MD PhD student here. And I was like, wait, what? You do, excuse me? And I was like, you're getting both degrees? What do you mean? And he was like, yeah, if you like research, you can get paid to go to school. And I was like, come again? I met this guy at Hopkins who seemed like very relatable. I switched labs into an MD PhD scientist lab. So I was working with oncologist who is an MD PhD, and he kind of mentored me to where I am today and like getting me into UCLA, Caltech.
Okay, really cool. So it sounds like research played a huge role. Did you start research early on in your undergrad?
So I started the second term of my freshman year, so pretty early. But I will say that the research I was involved in was like not real research. I was basically a custodian for the lab, and all I was doing was cleaning and organizing, which is totally fine because just being around competent scientists was really important for my development, I think. And then every year after that, I was working in some sort of lab. And overall, I worked in 3 labs, 2 tissue engineering labs, 1 cancer genetics lab. And after I graduated from Hopkins, I took 1 gap year to work with that MD PhD mentor.
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere, even if it's washing glassware.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think every undergrad has washed at least 1 beaker or pipette in their lifetime.
If you're out there and you're working hard at something and you think you're not getting recognized, just keep developing and keep growing in the sense where, you know, you do the little things well. You're very good with the details, and then once people have more responsibility to offer you, you can hit the ground running.
Would you say that your undergrad research was in a line with what you're doing now, or it's a completely different shift in focus? And when people are, say, applying to MD PhDs, do they expect you to have this vision of what type of research you're going to pursue?
The answer to all those questions is no. The answer is an unequivocal no. I had no idea I would be doing bioengineering research as a PhD. The thing is, I had to learn an entirely new skill set in grad school, which is why I think you shouldn't be fazed if you're interested in a topic you don't have a skill set for now, because you can learn those skills once you get to schools. Just get really good at whatever you're doing now, and the skills of like critical thinking, reasoning, working hard, those are going to translate into whatever you do in the future.
Start with the basics or fundamentals and then slowly layer up the complexity. So did you have any clinical experiences during your time?
I shadowed a few different physicians, some in LA and some in Baltimore. For MD PhDs, clinical experience isn't super important, and I think for MDs it's a lot more important, and showing service and volunteering is a lot more valuable. But if you're interested in MD PhD, I would say your research and your ability to speak about your research is going to be far more impactful.
So why did you choose the UCLA Caltech MD PhD program?
It was actually a really easy choice for me because this room, this is where I grew up.
Oh, really?
I actually went to high school like 15 minutes from Caltech.
Wow.
Caltech was always kind of my dream in high school. I always thought like, that's where all the nerds go. There's no way I'm ever gonna make it. And here I am. So life works out in really funny ways.
For undergrad, I didn't even apply to Caltech because I was like, there's no point. I'm not gonna get into Caltech. How were the first 2 years of med school like? And so you did those at UCLA, right?
Yeah, so my first years of med school were at UCLA, and they were so fun. And I think the most important thing about med school was that I was surrounded by really bright people who wanted to be great future physicians. So you know, studying with them, it was really a privilege to be in that kind of community. Unfortunately, I had to step aside to go to Pasadena to do my PhD. And I will say it's a lot more isolating, right? Like you're in the research trenches by yourself, kind of grinding away. A lot of things don't work. I would say if I had to quantify, probably 95% of my experiments just fail, and a lot of my engineering doesn't work. And that's kind of okay. Like as a PhD student, I've learned to roll with the punches and just say, this is my life now. Eventually, things will start working.
I can imagine the culture was pretty different between medicine and grad school. So the curriculum in med school, is it majority memorizing or just, you know, consuming large amounts of information? And then grad school is more of independent thinking, you know, critical thinking.
It's so funny that you mentioned that. I just like subconsciously talked about all the amazing people at UCLA. I didn't speak of the curriculum because Med school curriculum, I think, across the nation is trash. Like if you're going to medical school, like I learned more online and through YouTube and all the online resources than I did in my actual med school classes. My UCLA professors, I'm so sorry if you ever watch this. I appreciate you, but the lectures were not that great. The difference is in grad school as a scientist, the stuff you learn is actually really applicable to your experiments. You're also at the cutting edge, right? Like what you're learning in medical school, for better or worse, has been discovered by like older people, you know, in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So it's not innovative, you're just kind of learning. The most boring part about medical school curriculum is that if a computer could do it better than me, then I'm not particularly interested in it, right? Like IBM Watson could sit there and diagnose a lot of pathological slides far better than I ever could with 40 years of training. So it's like, by definition, I can't win, I'm not interested, like leave that to the computers. There are things though that computers can't do, and that's like the whole critical thinking, reasoning part, and that's where grad school is super cool, and you get to practice that a lot more. Like you take an idea and then you do a ton of research, literature review, and then you see how you make that idea come to life, and that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that whole thing you said about the computer can do it better and faster than you, I think that was the engineer in you coming out. Well, can you talk a little bit about your current research? So your grad program is in bioengineering, which is what I majored in undergrad and made a few videos about.
Yeah, I saw some of them.
Oh God, my dignity is lost.
In terms of my bioengineering research, I had this kind of crazy idea of using immune cells as Trojan horses to fight cancer. And I think if you think of what a cancer is, right, you can imagine a solid mass in your body, but they're not all disease cells. The cancer requires healthy cells from our immune system, from other areas of our body to actually support itself and grow. So it's kind of this hodgepodge and a mixture of cells, but those healthy cells have to get there somehow. And the cancer is sending out signals to recruit these healthy cells. So if you can engineer the cells that the cancer cells are recruiting just naturally, to do what you want it to once you get there, just like Trojan horses, right? Then maybe we have a more powerful cancer therapeutic agent. I think the coolest thing about doing bioengineering research and why I think it's the future is because you can program a cell to do incredible things. Like cells have already evolved to take inputs and then produce a tremendous number of outputs, and they can use logic, right? Like a cell isn't a dumb thing. It takes a ton of inputs at once and then spits out an output. It's basically the best biological clock that, you know, nature ever designed. But imagine if I can engineer the cell to say, oh, I sense that there's this cancer signal here, I'm gonna spit out a cancer fighting output. Ultimately, the goal is to use our own bodies to fight the cancer itself. And I think immunotherapy, which is kind of that huge class of what I just mentioned, is getting a lot of traction, and we need really bright people to get involved with the field to push it forward. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, beautiful. That concludes this chat. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. It was really fun chatting. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to talk about like all of these concepts or topics with any one person before, so it was fun.
If you made it to the end of this video, you should definitely consider getting an MD PhD because clearly you are great at sticking things out for the long haul. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to check out his channel right here, and I will see you whenever I post the next video.